Hi, what's up? What's up? It is RC Apologist here with another episode of the Tillian Thinker podcast. Thank y'all for tuning in for this one. We're going to be taking our time with this because it is an interesting one we're going over. It's been a while since I have done one of these, and main reason, ultimately, I've had even a motivation regarding the whole deal is I just got done doing a particular live stream that was done with Hamza Mayat of Hamza's Den and a couple other people. So we're going to be doing a response to what I found to be a bit of basically ignorance in not just basic fundamental philosophy of a classical logical problem, but rather it's even a dismissal of Islamic philosophy, of which was apparently at one point addressed and stated that the Islamic philosophers were heretics, it seems. So I am kind of not sure why this was the route they decided to take, but let's just get into it. So we're going to go piece by piece into a particular issue on the logical problem of the one and the many, and how then the Muslim responds to it. So, mind you, this is still going on during the live thing at this point, so trying to get certain bits here and there is going to take some time. Hopefully it doesn't get too much crazy with trying to get to where we're needing all the time on it. So, let me just turn the volume up a bit. All right, and see how this works. I know I asked this to Al-Yemeni during our debates regarding what is referred to as the logical problem of the one and the many, and I was curious to see what you and Farid, if y'all had a particular... The logical problem of the one and the many.
The logical problem of the one and the many?
Mm-hmm. I'll see. Explain it to them, and then...
Okay, yeah. Now, note, I'm going to try to explain the logical problem, but watch, or listen, rather, what happens. So the logical problem of the one and the many is a problem in philosophy that deals specifically with metaphysics and epistemology in a connected sense. It's about the issue about the justification of knowledge of what we have in reality. Plato's whole thing about trying to justify, for example, why there is unity while there at the same time there is diversity or particulars. That's being the basis, essentially the problem is with the fact that there is unity.
Stop.
Yeah. Now notice I haven't even gotten to explain fully the problem, let alone Plato's answer. And this ends up going back to what then Hamza tries to accuse this whole thing of being.
No, what's he talking about? Yeah, can you translate it? Sorry, that was too technical for me, man. Go on.
Yeah, so it's not really a problem for us, but essentially, it is hard to simplify. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong.
What's the point being made from it?
The point, to simplify it, if I'm not mistaken, is to say that, actually, to be honest, I don't actually know how to...
Just to briefly explain it here, at least the part that I was trying to get to, I've stated the issue about the justification of knowing things in reality that are unity and diversity. In other words, how do we account for there being unity and diversity in this world? How do we ultimately, key word there, ultimately account for it? I was trying to go into this, not simply offering a solution yet, but offering simply what the problem is and why some people historically that tried to offer it failed. That being Aristotle and Plato, both failed to provide a valid solution.
I don't know how to simplify it.
No debate with this guy. What's going on, man?
No. I know the concept, but to simplify it, I don't know how to simplify.
No, but what's the point it's supporting? What's the point he was making?
Now, the one thing I respect Yemeni on this, and unfortunately this is a part that I had to also concede with as well on, that's a thing that's a good thing of him from that, from Al-Yemeni to do an admission of this, but at the same time there is a problem that does make it an issue, and I wish that some philosophers try to make more introductory works into this that can be at a more basic introductory level into philosophy, because a lot of the stuff comes from usually more the advanced works. Like, it was even difficult trying to find Islamic philosophical works that dealt with this particular problem, until I decided to get the Oxford Handbook of Islamic Philosophy, where they do kind of talk about which works of these early philosophers go over the issue. And the only time I really know about this, at least in an introductory level, was from Cornelius Van Til, eventually John Frame, and then a few others that come in discussing it. And then even then, there's still some philosophical journals out there that are still trying to say that Aristotle's solution is the logical route, even though I disagree with that completely. So,
tell me the point, man.
Well, as I stated, is the issue about justifying the knowledge of what we know in reality, specifically in dealing what is referred to as universals and particulars. In other words, unity and diversity regarding the whole thing. So notice I'm trying to refer to the technical terms, the universals and particulars. Note, I'm not even trying to use abstract or concrete universals and particulars, but rather just simply universals and particulars, because especially if you're trying to explain this on a basic level, you don't need to start going down the particular distinctions of the abstract and the concrete. So for an example, in an analogy of it, we have the concept about fruit. The fruit would be the universal, the unity. And then if you talk about particulars or diversity, there's then the different kinds, such as apples, oranges, all those other different kinds of things. The issue... So, and keep in mind, that's not the only one that exists out there, of course. There's, for example, tennis is a universal, and then the particular is the tennis match. So there's the game, the universal of tennis, and then in each particular that constitutes what then is involved in tennis, you see tennis matches. For example, they share the universal of being involved in the rules of tennis, but there are different players who will play different people in different games, and they're not exactly the same exact game, but they do share that unity of universal. So diversity, yet unity. There is then the universal of redness, but then there's particulars of redness, which is a red light, a red apple. How can we find university or commonality between a red light and a red apple? Through the universal of redness. So there are several different examples that can be brought about to explain the issue about knowing and accounting for diversity, yet unity in such a world that we live in. It was then in trying to account for why we can meaningfully refer to such things in terms of unity and diversity. How can we do so? Plato tried to argue by forms being the case. In other words, one over the many, that everything starts with the notion of unity and then becomes diversity. And then
ponders when you need him, man. What's the point you're making?
The point I'm asking is simply, what is your solution to the logical problem of the one and the many?
I don't see a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's the thing, because it wasn't allowing me to finish regarding the particular deal, and especially when there's that one comment that was then mentioned. I don't know, I couldn't hear briefly what was being said. He said, where's someone when you need him? But regarding this particular issue, the problem is, again, how does one then account for unity and diversity in this world? And says there is not a problem. Again, just ignorance of the philosophical literature, ignorance of what exactly is the problem. And as you eventually see when they discuss the issue about the logical problem of evil, they don't even understand how then the logical problem of evil works compared to even the Muslim philosophers who have dealt with this. And I know because of the fact that I made a similar mistake that they made when trying to engage in the logical problems, saying that it's not a problem. But that's just, again, showing ignorance. I can say that evil does not propose itself as an issue to the Christian, meaning we are not denying that evil exists. We just have a defense. We have a solution to the problem. That's a given. Not just for the Christian, but even for the Muslim. As much as I hate to disagree or try to like point out something, like I have to agree that the Muslims also have a problem, though it is somewhat problematic in light of Unitarian presuppositions and ultimate starting points. I believe the issue again refers to can we at least account for why evil then exists in such a way that is logically sufficient. But again, to say that because of this, therefore there was never a problem is just, again, ignorance on basic philosophy. And that's where Al-Yemeni, he actually is versed in at least the basics of philosophy. So if the fact that he would say what he says later is what's going to be kind of baffling.
Present the problem I've got.
The problem is in regards that you say, for example, there is the particulars and the diversity and the unity. How do you account for that?
This is basically with regards to Tawheed, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. He's going to swap.
So I haven't said anything about Tawheed now, mind you. I did that during the issue with me and Al-Yemeni. But could the solution be used by Tawheed? Possibly. Some people have certainly tried to do so. That has been the case, again, with what is noted in Ibn Sina, Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, from what at least I've been reading in terms of how they have argued on the treatise of the oneness as being the main solution to a lot of problems. The one, that could go there. But I know at the same time, as it seems I have been surprised, there have been different solutions by Muslims, such as one person trying to argue for the equal ultimacy of the one and the many by trying to say that there is then God, the essence of God, the oneness of God, and then there is then the many, and the many at this point would be described as essentially this notion about what's the term that's being used specifically? Oh. Sorry about the background noise. That'd be my brother and the dog, and his dog coming in. Very good boy, by the way. But what they would argue on the attributes of Allah, the 99 attributes is these how some try to refer to it as, go to saying that many is therefore then the accounting of the diversity, the plurality in reality. And thus you have equal ultimacy of the one and the many. The problem with this is that, number one, it's trying to offer a solution and mimic the Trinity to the best that it can, though it, again, has its follies with trying to do so. The second thing is that this would therefore then reduce the issue on divine simplicity, especially if one is then trying to make the argument of consistent monotheism, because the issue then is, if you're going to say that the attributes are many, but that at the same time Allah is only one, you have the problem being that God is not therefore a divinely simple being, because especially if you're going to agree with the statement God is not composed of parts. In other words, God does not have composition or formation at this point. And if one tries to affirm divine simplicity and agrees, yet God is not composed of parts, does not have composition, therefore God cannot be solved by this solution of the essence and the attributes, because then it's trying to, because the attributes have to be one, not many. Therefore, you're ultimately indirectly going back to one. But if you try to say then God is many, like the polytheists do, on the essence of God, then what you have at that point to justify then the attributes still being many, you still have God being one, many at that point. Therefore, you have a problem. So you have these issues, but again, I haven't even brought up Tawheed yet. They're just assuming that that's where I'm going. Because again, I could always be wrong. That's why I'm trying not to make assumptions lately about what exactly is going on for a particular Muslim. Because as I've been looking in my interactions with Muslims, as well as even reading the Islamic philosophy literature, you can't always assume every Muslim thinks and says the exact same thing, especially regarding a solution to the problems in philosophical literature, or even just general basic understandings in philosophy.
Right.
Well,
It's
some people go towards that, others don't. Like, I've talked to one Muslim that says it is the issue of Allah as the one, and then try to say that therefore then the attributes are then how one accounts for the diversity or the many into the issue. Though there have been others that do it a different direction. For example, I believe it's Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi went more for the focus on specifically the oneness element.
Well, the thing is, look, all of that is not a problem, right? Because at the end of the day, the oneness of Tawheed...
If it's not a problem, number one, it technically is a problem. But if you're going to say that it's not an issue, that then presupposes you have a solution to the logical problem of the one and the many. But do we ever hear an accounting for it?
It's already codified within the religion, right? It's standard.
Right.
What's the problem I've got?
As I've stated before, I've said it in terms of the issue about justification of unity and diversity. But at the same time, you sort of probably could hear it, but that was being talked over at that point, is the issue of how do you then account for unity and diversity. In other words, we have the notion of redness, and then there's red apples, red lights. How do we account for this unity and diversity when it comes to at least discussing the concept of red? How can we have a meaningful conversation using meaningful language that justifies our knowledge of these things in this metaphysical reality? That's the problem that is being presented, not just to the Christians, the atheists, the Hindus, the Buddhists, but also to the Muslims. The problem that you have is in accounting for the idea that there is unity and diversity, and which one comes as the precedence, which one takes authority ultimately in regards to the situation about knowing those things.
No, but the thing is like I mentioned with Tawheed, it's very clear Allah is only one, right? So the authority comes from only Him, right?
So I can't tell if ultimately, because again, this is very different than his solution during our debate, Al-Yemeni's solution. Because in our debate, he said, okay, there's one and many. There, done. He doesn't provide an actual solution. Now it sounds, as he's saying, and at least trying to turn to this particular point, saying, okay, well, what you have here is, therefore, there's this unity. You have the oneness of Allah. Therefore, that's what puts that out. Again, this is the repetition of the flaw and error that Plato made. That is, of course, if that's what Al-Yemeni is stating. Again, I don't know if that is what he's saying, because the way he words it and goes about it is like he say there's a solution, but at the same time there's other instances where saying it's not even a problem to begin with, period, so therefore not even to put anything forward, which again just shows a lack of knowledge on this particular problem that earlier philosophers, not just in terms of the Greeks and the Christians, but even the Muslim philosophers pointed out is a philosophical problem, and thus why they gave what is called a defense or a solution to the problem based on the ultimate philosophical treatise they presented in their works.
Right. Many, when we refer to the attributes, he uses his authority and his attributes to conduct what he does in the world. And that's it. So it's not a problem for us at all. And I mentioned that in the debate.
So then which would you be saying then? Is it the issue of one over many, many over one, or the equal ultimacy of the one and the many? Now, note I'm trying to ask here, what is the solution specifically that is trying to present? Because there's usually, mostly people just say there's only two. I like to say that that's a false dichotomy and that there is a third solution. But I always get surprised if there is someone trying to then argue for a fourth. Something that thinks outside the box, but I'm always curious to see it challenged. What you'd be saying is your solution then to the problem.
Well, it's not a problem to begin with. To state that it is a problem.
But it is, though, because it exists, especially in the philosophical literature, and not just
just because it exists in the philosophical literature doesn't make it a problem in reality.
It is when you are reading and focusing on what is being emphasized in that problem, and then you apply it into reality. And when one just simply hears about these things, because again, there are times that I presented this particular problem, again, not to simply just Muslims. I have, though, provided it to a Muslim before. A friend of mine who says that if one ignores it, it is a big problem, and that Muslims should stop being silent on it. In fact, it became to a point where he's trying to ask other Muslims to actually speak on it, because he recognizes it's an issue and it is a problem, even though he has at least a temporary solution to the problem. So that's, again, what we're dealing with here. Is it's, again, not just simply saying, hey, you got this deal here where, it's a problem, but it's not really a problem. It's not what's going on at all. And if anyone was at least, not necessarily a philosopher, just at least familiar with what is being said and then looking into it, you wouldn't be saying these kind of things that, again, just show a lack of knowledge on not just basic philosophy, but even Islamic philosophy at that point, which, from what I gathered, at least in the debate that I had with Al-Yemeni, that he was someone that knew a bit and tried to argue from philosophy for his particular point, especially in applying a philosophical notion called natural theology regarding the whole deal.
Right, because philosophy, there are many avenues with regards to philosophy that cast out on a lot of things that are pretty certain, right? It's like, for example, the philosophical argument of can God create a rock that he cannot lift, right? There are many flaws with that argument to begin with, right, with regards to its premises. So just because it's a philosophical argument and it poses a problem doesn't mean that the problem exists, because the premise could be flawed. So the same with this issue of the problem of the one and the many. The premise is flawed when it comes to Islam, because in Islam we have no issue with it with regards to Tawheed. Allah is one, right? The universal, right? His attributes are the many, right? But they are not distinct from him, right? So we're not creating any sort of distinction. We're not saying that you have the fruit and then you have multiple fruits, right? Different fruits. This is all this is all him, right? It's part of his essence. So we have.
So I want to just go back here for people to kind of catch up on that.
But they are not distinct from him, right?
So they are not distinct from him. What exactly is not distinct?
Its premises. So just because it's a philosophical argument and it poses a problem doesn't mean that the problem exists, because the premise could be flawed. So the same with this issue of the problem of the one and the many. The premise is flawed when it comes to Islam, because in Islam we have no issue with it with regards to Tawheed. Allah is one, right? The universal, right? His attributes are the many, right? But they are not distinct from him.
So they're not distinct from him. So I'm not sure if he's trying to argue for divine simplicity at this point when it comes to this particular notion by stating that they are not distinct from him. If he's trying to say that the attributes are identical to the essence of Allah. Which, again, would be very interesting and shows, again, part of the other debate in Islamic philosophy regarding if someone actually is, if a Muslim could actually affirm it. Because I've seen things where people say affirming divine simplicity means you reject Islam. And others would dismiss it as a Western concept. In fact, there's one Muslim I've been talking to, Huzafaya, I believe is the name, where he was saying that you can't say they are just that they aren't distinct. In other words, that you can't make the you can't put them identical, because again you have to reject divine simplicity. So again, to me, I'm starting to get a bit like what I find to be a contradictory solutions that are being offered to try to account for this problem, but.
Right, so we're not creating any sort of distinction. We're not saying that you have the fruit and then you have multiple fruits, right?
But at the same time, then, how then do you account for that? For example, you have fruits, and then you have particular diversity, the different fruits. What brings any form then of universality or unity between an apple and an orange? Or if you're not making distinctions, then therefore you can't even say apple and orange. You just say fruit. because you're not allowed to make distinctions. That is the logical conclusion by stating, do not make particular distinctions. Again, this is the error that Plato makes by arguing for oneness or unity over the many. That it starts with making no distinctions, and that distinctions are therefore an illusion, as Plato argued.
With different fruits. This is all.
Now, I just want to point out, like he says that, and this is why I say to look up and be familiar with the literature on this sort of stuff, because otherwise you become ignorant and make these errors that were historically made to begin with, regarding the whole concept of these logical problems. If he was a bit familiar with it, he wouldn't be repeating Plato at this point.
This is all him, right? It's part of his essence. So we have no issue with that. It's not a problem to begin with, right? So to bring in a philosophical argument to make it a problem, it doesn't work. It works with Trinity, with the Trinity, right? Because that's something that you have to try and explain from a philosophical standpoint, and this is the avenue that a lot of Christians have tried to take.
And also, there's Muslims that have gone down a philosophical route as well, because again, theology is ultimately philosophical. No debate about that. You cannot dispute that, especially when theology or notions about God ask philosophical questions such as the meaning of life, why are we here, why were we made. All these things are philosophical by nature, but they're questions proposed in religious scriptures, in the religion of Islam and the religion of Christianity. I affirm a philosophical notion. Why? Because that is essentially the core element of the religion. It is philosophical. Same with Islam. When you ask, why does evil exist? And you have a solution from the Quran and the Hadith. Why do we exist? You provide a solution from the Quran and the Hadith, still answering a philosophical question on a theological basis. Again, you can't really separate philosophy and theology. It is literally impossible to do these things. And some people in the chat were trying to state that it was like, this doesn't affect Akida. Your Akida still is rooted in basic elements of philosophy. And if you can't even get to what are considered to some degree core fundamental ideas or foundations in philosophy, then you end up committing errors, unfortunately. Yeah.
With regards to agency and philosophy, in general.
So I'm going to kind of skip past a bit, because they then go on the issue about the topic of original sin and how it relates to Christianity. But we've covered that before on this channel, and if you want to go see that, then for sure. There are several different videos that have covered and addressed the particular thing. And there's other brothers in Christ that have also touched on it pretty good. To the problem of evil, you and me both have this. So now, know what I'm going to say here. I would agree with you partially, but the thing is, the reason why it's not a problem, it's not saying therefore that it wasn't a problem to begin with. It's that you provided what is either considered a defense or a theodicy to the problem of evil. You and me both have been able to do that. However, again, that doesn't mean therefore it was never actually a problem. And this is what people like Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi, and other philosophers recognize this as a problem, but they try to provide a defense, a solution to the problem, so that it doesn't propose itself as an issue. Now, notice, I have simply been trying to give a compliment to Islam at this point. I have not said that they haven't been able to provide it because they just can't. I'm saying they have at least provided a sufficient solution to the problem. Though there are other issues that I could get into about that on it, but providing simply the benefit of the doubt and giving a graceful benefit that these Islamic philosophers provided a solution to what is called the logical problem of evil. But no, that's not good enough. Just saying that they recognize the problem exists, but they solved and defended the notion and can account for why evil exists, and when we have a good and all-powerful God in the world, that's not good enough for some of these Muslims, apparently.
Remind me of Reformed Christian. Do you know what you remind me of?
Sure.
You remind me of somebody who's trying to, like, for example, you're a Christian, yeah?
Yeah.
So you believe Christianity solves the problem of sin.
So this is what I was saying when we got to the issue about the issue of sin.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I've been trying, then I keep getting cut off before I can even finish explaining the problem.
I think just.
Now, here's where again it shows ignorance comes into play. Ignorance is bliss regarding this particular deal here for this particular Muslim Hamza. And this is what was very disappointing and just shows again even what I find just to be hugely disrespectful. Not to just philosophers in general, because I know there's definitely disagreements about Aristotelian and Platonic notions about God and philosophy. But it's basically giving essentially a huge amount of disrespect towards Al-Kindi, Al-Razi, Ibn Masara, Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Al-Ghazali, though Ghazali did have his criticism of one particular person's approach and then tried to offer his own on this particular solution to the problem of the one and the many. Again, all these historical philosophers, and there's many others that exist, Hamza just basically dissing them at this point and treating their works as garbage, even though they're supposed to be fellow Muslims. Even more so interesting is the idea that, because I don't think we've heard it in this particular one, but if you do go back to this particular episode of the Arena on Hamza's Den, you will find there is a concept of saying that these philosophers, for the most part, were heretics. Not sure why or how. Some certainly have reached into the realm of heresy, but then recanted. So I'm not sure which one is being specifically referred to as a heretic regarding the list of early Muslim philosophers.
Yeah.
How can you have people without God?
Well, they try to argue based on certain...
I've been listening to this for like 20 minutes. I still have no idea what the problem is.
Now, here's where, again, the ignorance is bliss from Hamza. Well, I've been trying to explain...
People in the chat are making you make it easy for us to name all the things we're talking about.
Yeah, I've been trying, then I keep getting cut off before I can even finish explaining the problem.
I think just leave it.
I mean, again, you can say that, but again, you're not different at that point than the atheists trying to say they don't have the problem of evil. You're just dismissing a problem that does exist, and Islamic philosophers in history have acknowledged the existence of the problem. They just try to provide a solution.
Just leave it.
Have acknowledged the existence of the problem. Now, here's ultimately what he's then saying to Al-Kindi, Al-Razi, Ibn Masara, Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, and Al-Ghazali. They just try to provide a solution.
Just leave it.
Just leave it. As if to not even consider what is being said of the problem, not just simply by me, but from what has been a problem for Plato and Aristotle, and that others have tried to fill in the blanks on. So, I have already provided what I found is a critique of Islam on, and not even using the problem of the one and the many, but referring to the deductive argument against Unitarianism, or the deductive argument against Tawheed, if you're using the specific wording for that. But this can also be a problem for Tawheed unless it provides a solution to the problem of the one and the many. So, that being said, that would be the time we have on this. So I just plead with, again, not just Hamza, Farid, and unfortunately it seems at this point, because I thought he understood slightly a bit of the problem, or at least basic philosophy, but it seems not, for Al-Yemeni to look into it, and also for other Muslims that are listening to this particular program. So, that being said, this has been RC Apologist. Y'all take care.